to me, and I would like to put it on your radar screen because I think there's a need to talk about this. And I know it's just exactly what the minister needs is one more syndrome to create another priority, and I realize it is overwhelming. But again, I'm sure you would agree with me, we're so good at the acute side. And then we send people home to rebuild their lives, and they don't have the support and the tools they need, just the help they need to regain their skills, which it is possible to do with what we know now about rebuilding your brain and really retraining yourself. We realize that miraculous things can happen. I'm going to turn over the rest of this time to my colleague from Richmond, the MLA from Richmond. He has some questions for you as well. Thank you.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to ask a few questions to the Minister, especially regarding issues facing the residents of Richmond County. I would be remiss, Mr. Chair, if I didn't first acknowledge our new Deputy Minister of Health, who Kevin McNamara, which is a name that's quite familiar in Richmond County. I believe his roots are from there, and he still has family in Richmond County, so we're certainly pleased to have someone in such an important position who I'm sure has a great appreciation of some of the challenges that we face in Richmond County. One of the issues I want to start off with, Mr. Chair, is last week I raised the question regarding the proposed new WB Kingston Medical Health Centre in Lardoise. This centre is meant to replace an existing facility which is 130 years old. In fact, it's the old convent in Lardoise, which was given to the community, and Dr. Kingston at the time moved in there and started his practice. Needless to say, the centre is no longer meeting the needs of the community. So for the last number of years, in fact, Mr. Chair, the community through its board has developed a proposal for a new health centre, which would be a modern facility for doctor offices, nurse practitioner, which is now practicing in the community, along with other medical services as well, and overall health services for the community. I do believe that all members of this House have endorsed the idea that these community health centres are the way to go for the future, and that in these centres will also not only provide emergency medical care, ongoing medical care, but more importantly will also play a very important role in health promotion and healthy lifestyles through the different clinics and different educational programs that are being provided. Now, Mr. Chair, as many other communities who've undertaken these such goals to build these centres, one of the main issues is getting the funding to build them. Right now, this centre has commitments from Enterprise Cape Breton Corporation for $500,000. The Richmond Municipal Council has committed $250,000. The community itself, which Richmond right now has a population under 10,000 people, and this would be serving about half the county, so let's say it's a catchment area of about 5,000 people, have committed to raising $250,000, which is an incredible amount of money for a small community. That brings them to $1 million, but the project right now, which I would say is a modest one, is pegged at $1.5 million. So there's $500,000 missing. The problem is, and I think the minister is aware, and it's not just an issue of her government, because the previous government, it was the same problem, is that the Department of Health has not been providing funding for capital projects that are not the Department of Health owned facilities. So right now, they're left with $500,000 missing. The business plan, which was sent to the minister in October 2009, shows that once it is built, it is anticipated that the revenues from the rentals for the medical profession that will be there will sustain the facility. So right now, it's not a matter of requiring ongoing financial support, which I do believe Department of Health is doing or has done for other community health centers once they're up and running. So right now, we're short $500,000. ECBC has seen this as an economic development tool for the community. That's how they brought their money in. It's under the idea this will create jobs, it will create employment, and it will stimulate the economy in that area and keep jobs in that area. Right now, Department of Health, as we now stand, is not a potential funding partner. So I know the minister is also the Minister of Health Promotion, which has been approached as well. We've approached economic development. I've approached the Industrial Expansion Fund. We've pretty much exhausted everything. So I guess my question today on behalf of the board, on behalf of resident Richmond County, is there anything that the minister is doing as Minister of Health to try to identify how the province could become a partner in accessing capital dollars, and can she indicate whether there's been any movement there, or whether she can give any sort of hope that there might be some role for the province to play in the construction of this facility?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, and I welcome the honourable member to the health estimates, and I'm very glad that the honourable member decided to raise this question with me again, because after he raised this matter in question period, I went back to my department and I asked I asked about the correspondence, because frankly I hadn't seen any correspondence and we couldn't find anything initially. It took a bit of searching, and indeed there was correspondence, to which I apologized to the community for having misplaced. We get a lot of correspondence in the department, and that doesn't occur very often, but from time to time a piece of correspondence will come in and it will be misplaced, but it's back where it belongs right now, and it indeed is very much on our radar. Now, let me say a couple of things to the honourable member. This government and our department are very committed in terms of primary health care delivery. And the fact that we don't have a program for capital construction in the department for primary health care centres is something that we're aware of. We're aware of the shortcomings of that situation. And we are thinking our way through a process of working with the district health authorities to identify the extent to which this exists as a problem around the province, because the honourable member's constituency is one of many rural constituencies with strong primary health care needs and a good base. Obviously, if you can raise that kind of money for a new centre, a good base, a community base, to be able to have primary health care, which is what we want. We want primary health care throughout the province. So at this stage, staff in the department have the proposal, are aware of the situation. There will be some discussions with the DHA to find out where this fits in terms of the DHA's provision of services and the primary health care assessments that they do, because they are very close. They're closer to the people than the Joseph Howe building. And what I would say is that we will work with the DHA to see what it is they have to say, and we will not close the door on good, strong primary health care in that particular community. And I haven't read the proposal myself since it's been located, but I would very much welcome an opportunity to do that and to talk with the honourable member further about it.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to hear the minister say that, because when I did check with the chair prior to asking the question, I was at a loss that it had not been replied to, and I certainly, having been elected the same time as the member, I certainly expected when she would enter the department, she'd want to make sure, as most of us do when we're ministers, that that kind of correspondence gets addressed immediately. So I have no doubt there's lots of correspondence going to the Department of Health, and I'm pleased that it has been identified because I believe there was a copy sent to the Premier's office as well. And I know that the board will be very anxious to hear from the Minister, and I'd be happy to arrange for a meeting with the board and the Minister along with her staff to discuss this. But as I said, I know there's pressures in the Department of Health, and that's why I think in this case it might be a matter of looking outside the box, outside of health, because Enterprise Cape Breton Corporation has looked at this as an economic development model and as well as an important factor in the economy of the community. So it might be time for the Minister to have discussions with either Minister of Finance and her colleagues to see, is there a way to look at other funding tools within the provincial government to make the investments in this capital construction, because I think it's one of those investments that clearly will pay off and bring money back, and maybe it's time that we start looking outside of the Department of Health for this kind of funding for these clinics. But I certainly will follow up with correspondence to the Minister and hope that we can meet and have the board give her more details on the plan. One of the other facilities in Richmond County I wanted to talk about is St. Anne's Centre in Arishat, which services the communities of Ilmadam, Louisdale, and surrounding areas. A very important facility. At the same time, I can say a very unique facility because of the fact that it is the only healthcare centre in Nova Scotia that is not under a DHA. Now, that has worked very well for the community. It has worked very well for St. Anne's. It has recognized its unique nature and the incredible amount of services that they're able to provide, as well as maintaining a level 4, I believe, emergency room, which has basically been done thanks to Dr. Laurie McNeil, who has been carrying an incredible workload and caseload for quite some time, as well as keeping that emergency room open. Now, as the Minister is probably aware, the famous Corpus Sanchez report finished with the final 2 clauses talking about St. Anne's Centre and the recommendation that St. Anne's Centre no longer be permitted to remain as a standalone facility, but that it be forced to merge with the Guysborough Antigonish Strait Health Authority. So my first question to Minister on this subject is, does the Minister intend to implement that aspect of the Corpus Sanchez report as it currently stands?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And to the honourable member, I haven't decided yet whether that recommendation will be implemented or not. But it is something that I will assess very carefully, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Well, I'm quite pleased to hear that, and I'm sure that the board itself and the community will be pleased to hear that there might still be an opportunity. And it's not a criticism of GASHA. GASHA has been, we still all rely on GASHA, especially St. Martha's Regional Hospital, which serves our communities, the work that GASHA does with the Strait Richmond Hospital, which as well serves Richmond County. But St. Anne's has worked, and I guess the message that they're saying is, why play around with something that's working? And the other concern is that by being included with GASHA, all of a sudden they are part of the mix when it comes to having to make funding decisions and possible funding reductions. And there's extreme concern of the elimination of the emergency room funding for that facility. So I know that the board has sent correspondence recently, in fact, to the Minister in the last few weeks, basically just outlining the many services that they provide and their desire to remain as a autonomous facility. And I just want to tell the Minister, I did have a bit of fear when I first saw Dr. Ross's interim report, because a few pages in he provides a map, and I noticed that St. Anne's Centre wasn't on his map. And I was afraid that that was an indication for St. Anne's, but I was happy to see at the end of the report, it does list St. Anne's as one of the health centres that does have emergency room service in the province. So hopefully any future reports will put St. Anne's back on the map on Ilmadam in Richmond County, but I'm certainly pleased to see that that is under consideration. And look forward to hearing from the Minister, because I know the board is quite anxious, as there has not been a formal agreement yet to join GASHA, although some discussions have taken place. One of the issues which I've raised in the House with the previous government and I'm curious to hear where the current minister's thinking is the issue of dialysis services in rural Nova Scotia. Richmond County, and especially Ilmadam, has been identified as having one of the highest rates of diabetes in Nova Scotia. In fact, more specifically, one of the specialists in Sydney has actually identified that the Acadian community tends to have a higher rate of diabetes than many other cultures. And so as a result of that, that doctor has been working with Department of Health to try to identify better services for Richmond County, because right now, while the Straight Richmond has started to provide some dialysis services, I believe the best way to describe it is that they provide needle dialysis. But the line dialysis, which is a more complicated one, is currently only available either at St. Martha's in Antigonish or at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital. And if you live in Richmond County, that's pretty much an hour and a half in either direction. So you're an hour to an hour and a half to get dialysis services. So if you live in Richmond County, having to travel 2 to 3 to 4 days a week, an hour to an hour and a half one way, is putting a tremendous amount of strain not only on the patients, but their caregivers, who have to take so much time out of their schedule to provide that. So we did meet with the Department of Health not long ago, prior to the last election, and we did speak with some of the staff. Warden John Boudreau, who's very sensitive to this topic, joined me for that meeting, and so we did have some discussion. But I'm curious, could the minister advise us, when can we expect to see line dialysis services at institutions such as the Straight Richmond Hospital?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the honourable member raises very important program issue. We do have a provincial dialysis program, and we have clinics, we have satellite sites, but it is true that the numbers of people who are traveling from various parts of the province, I mean, the honourable member from Shelburne is often speaking to me about this issue for people from his community who have to travel to Yarmouth. The honourable member from Guysborough, Sheet Harbour, is often speaking to me about people who, from the Canso area, for example, who have really long distances to travel. So this is a growing pressure on our healthcare system without any question. And we have in the department, we have an initiative that is looking at where dialysis patients are around the province and where the services are around the province. And as we, I think, have an ability to address those pressures, we need to make sure that we get services, particularly where we're seeing critical masses of people in communities. Now, there's an additional, I think, possibility here that I'm actually somewhat familiar with, because I mentioned earlier that my nephew had a kidney transplant, and he's actually he's a young adult today, and he has been on home dialysis for 3 years. It's quite it's quite an amazing thing that can happen in terms of people's ability to be able to take care of that aspect of their health. Not everybody can do this, I recognize this. But for people who are able to do this, it is not liberating because they still have to follow that regime. But boy, does it ever make a difference in terms of not having to be on the road to get dialysis all the time you spend in the car, the time you spend, you can be in your home, you can watch television, you can sleep at night, you can do a lot of things. I don't know where the future will bring us in terms of technology and medical procedures, but I have a hope and and I have a belief that we're going to see dialysis for a lot of our population change quite dramatically in the not too distant future. When my nephew was a teenager and much younger, this would have been unthought of as an option, home dialysis. Today, it's very much an option, and it has an added bonus. And the financial end of things shouldn't be our motivating operandus here if the quality of life wasn't better, but it improves people's quality of life dramatically. So I just want the honourable member to know that the dialysis program in the department, the funding is holding steady. We spent last year, our forecast, $615,000, and we've budgeted $794,400 for the upcoming year. It's a modest increase. It's an increase of more than $100,000. It will give us, I think, an ability to certainly maintain the services we have and perhaps add a bit. I don't know if the honourable member has been to the dialysis unit in St. Martha's. It's just recently been renovated. It's phenomenal. It's really a very, lots of natural light, very airy. If you have to travel and have dialysis, it has to be probably one of the better settings you can have it in.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly have heard some great comments about it, but I'm sure the minister, being from that area, would join me in saying that in mid-December one would not want to make the commute 3 to 4 times a week from St. Martha's to Ilmadam, because you probably go through 4 different weather patterns in that, and neither of those weather patterns are pleasant at that time of the year, and that's the frustration. And we have a situation I've advocated for a number of families where we actually had support from the Department of Community Services that were providing some mileage support because of the frequency of the trips that were being made down to Sydney. The problem is that particular family, they're now both over 65, and they no longer qualify for any support from community services, so they're left on their own to pick up the mileage. So I'm curious in that regard, has the minister given any consideration to the possibility of putting together a program that would provide some form of mileage support for low-income families that are required to travel on a regular basis from significant distances to access dialysis support in the province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm advised that the Department of Community Services does have such a program to assist low-income families to receive dialysis through travel.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
And the only challenge with that is that Department of Community Services won't assist after you turn 65. And so the situation I was referring to is they are low income, but now that they're 65, the Department of Community Services, unless the minister wants to make an amendment to that policy, currently at 65 you no longer qualify, and there's reasons for that. But so my question would be, if Department of Community Services is still willing to help low-income earners under 65, will the Department of Health at least entertain looking at assisting low-income families who are above 65 years of age and would no longer be eligible for any support from community services? Because right now, once you're over 65, you're on a fixed income, you're on your pensions, and traveling 3 to 4 days a week to either St. Martha's or the Cape Breton Regional Hospital is a significant cost, wear and tear on the vehicles, meals, everything else. So I'm curious whether the minister would be prepared to at least explore the idea with her department and at least maybe even try to identify the numbers of Nova Scotians that would be over 65 and requiring this type of dialysis support.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and certainly it's a good suggestion that we take, that we at least crunch the numbers. and take a look at how many people are in this situation, and you know, what the financial impact might be. Certainly, if people need access to health care, we have a duty to provide it and to try to figure out, you know, how to best provide it.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Well, thank you, and I'm pleased to hear that the minister is prepared to look at that, and I'll certainly be happy to follow that up with some correspondence, because I think that's a debate we should have, because at the end of the day, we're doing budget estimates and we're looking at whether this is a reasonable budget and what best ways to spend money. So I make the suggestion knowing that I don't have all the numbers, and I'm not sure how many people this applies to, but I can certainly tell you, I know of a few instances where individuals chose not to take treatments because they were not prepared to travel 3 to 4 days a week to either Cape Breton Regional or St. Martha's, and we all know how those ended. They ended in death. There was options, but they just weren't prepared to have to go through the turmoil and the financial impact that would have had. So I think the minister is correct. We do have a duty in assisting people. At the same time, we have some financial realities to try to keep in mind as well. I would be remiss if I did not ask the minister if she could provide us with a bit more details on the self-managed care allowance. The minister will probably recall that I have risen in my place on a number of occasions to talk about the need to provide support for families who are caring for loved ones at home. And we realize that the program that was announced in the last budget has had significant shortcomings, to say the least, and I'd be curious whether the minister would be able to provide us with a bit of a recap on that program as far as how many people either made inquiries or applied to the different DHAs and how many were approved for that program, and if the minister could provide those numbers. But I guess more specifically, maybe she already has it, that's great.
You could ask some questions on it if you like. It's just today.
I guess my question is the minister prepared today to tell us when the details of that program, this new program that she has put together, are going to be made available? And I'm sure many families in Richmond County would want me to ask, when are the applications going to be ready?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park had asked a number of questions the other evening about the caregivers program and wanted to know how many people qualified by DHA, and I've tabled that information, and I see she's provided it to the honourable member. We have in this, in the budget for this year, a substantial increase in the amount of money that we've allotted for caregivers, but as well on that line item is the self-managed care program, as well as aids, some monitoring aids for people who need them. We have undertaken a process of review of the existing caregivers allowance, which has included some consultation with groups like Caregivers Nova Scotia, for example, to get from them a more complete picture of what they think of the existing program, how they would improve on that program, and what other programs might look at. And caregivers are just one of the groups that we've consulted with. We have gathered information from other jurisdictions as well, and we are in the process of sorting through the information we've received back from our consultation and reviewing what options we might have available to us. And I have yet to make a decision with respect to the preferred options, and then the member would know that the process is, once we've arrived at some decision in the department, I will move it forward to my cabinet colleagues for a decision, And at that point, we will be we will make an announcement on what the future of these programs will look like. So I do not have those details yet. We're very much involved in a process of building on the existing programs. But let me say that we do understand the importance of self-managed care. And this has been an area that I know the honourable member has had a keen interest in over the years.
Order, please. The honourable time allotted for the opposition party has expired. The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to stand once again and maybe ask a bunch more questions on the Department of Health's budget, and more specifically some of the programs as we see them, and maybe some more questions referred to our own constituencies. I know I'll be sharing my time with the member for MLA, the MLA for Cumberland South. And maybe while we're talking about caregivers allowance and maybe to get a better feeling, if I remember correctly in some of the questioning that we had of you back in the fall, when we were bringing the issues of the caregivers allowance, the people that weren't able to get into it, you had made a statement that you were looking at creating a new program and maybe phasing this one out. And now we seem to be into a phase of, well, let's see if we can make this one better and make it work for Nova Scotians, which is what I think the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party were advocating for in the fall. So I'm just wondering where that change happened between the fall and this spring.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, I think, first of all, I would say that there has really been no change. We have a caregiver's allowance program, and we have, it's getting closer to 700 people who are enrolled in the program, 650 plus, I guess, last count. 661 clients have been approved for the caregiver allowance program. It was initially targeted at about 750. This program, as the member will no doubt remember, had a very, it had, I suppose in a way, a bit of a controversial assessment on who would gain eligibility. So there's something called a MAPLE assessment tool, and it has different levels in terms of the level of care that's required. And only the people with the most severe needs on the assessment tool, a MAPLE 5, were eligible for the caregiver's allowance. And those people tended to be people who had a lot of behavioral features of their situation, in addition to maybe mobility and some other things. And so this program was a new program. It gave $400 a month to a caregiver. There was an income test. There is an income test. You had to have an income that didn't go above a certain level, and so forth. And initially, there was quite a lot of interest in the program. There were many people who thought they would be eligible, didn't realize there was an income test, for example, and were very they were very concerned. They didn't feel it was fair that there was an income test. Other people were carrying very high level of care, but no aggressive or violent behavior, difficult behavior. And so they would be a MAPLE 4 on the assessment and not a MAPLE 5 and not be able to qualify. So, but the program was designed for a MAPLE 5, and a certain amount of money was allocated in the budget for a small group, 750 applicants. And So it's been a program that it isn't a year old. It was implemented in August, as a matter of fact, so we're still a bit away from the first year. But nevertheless, we have taken this program and we have embarked on a consultation around the program with a number of interested parties, such as Caregivers Nova Scotia, Dr. Janice Keefe, who holds the chair in healthy aging at Mount St. Vincent, who is a very strong proponent for supports for caregivers, and, you know, a number of other organizations, the Alzheimer's organization, and, you know, so forth. And so we've gone out to talk to these folks about what they think about the caregiver's allowance. And while people see its limitations, they like the idea of a caregiver's allowance. Now, so we're still looking at the information that we've received from various groups and crunching the numbers in terms of the information we now know around the level of interest in the province, just because of the applications that we've processed, you know, even people who aren't eligible. And in this year, we will make some decision about this program and how this program will either conclude or be expanded or continue on the same. I mean, you essentially have, you know, 2 or 3 options. Now, in addition to that, our party in the provincial election made a commitment to introducing a self-managed care allowance, and as well as some technical aids. I can't remember, they have a specific name. But it's kind of that not medical alert, but you know, the alert kinds of devices where if a senior falls at home, they've got the panic button. So these kinds of programs for seniors. We, in the budget, you will see an increase over the caregiver's allowance that was budgeted, allocated, both estimate and forecast. There is an increase, and that increase is the Personal Alert Assistance Programs is what it's called. So the increase in the budget line is, I can't remember exactly how much, but I think it's about $3 million. And it reflects the commitment we made for self-managed care allowances, as well as the Personal Alert Assistance Programs. And that these programs are to be developed, and as we have those developed, we will certainly be letting all honorable members in this House know about that. The line item has increased by $1.9 million.
The honourable member for Argyle.
$3 million. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Minister. Thank you very much for those answers. And you know, and I think a lot of provincial programs, when you look at them, all are based on maybe somebody else's program, and it's not necessary to have to go and recreate a wheel in order to fit a niche or a requirement in our society. And we always felt that when it came to the services of long-term care, that there was individuals in this province, many individuals in this province, that were saving our treasury millions and millions of dollars by keeping loved ones at home. And any little bit that we could have provided them to help with some of the bills, some of the time required, you know, a lot of people leaving jobs and leaving certain businesses, that it was worth a few $1 million, if not more. So it's good to hear that there's been some serious consideration given to the caregiver's allowance. And I can say that you know, I would offer, you know, myself, or I know the minister, the member for Richmond, who has been an advocate for this program for many years, to help out any way we could. To help make this program better for Nova Scotians. So I thank the minister for that. So I'll move on to a couple other things, and I'm wondering, and it's good that you have your deputy with you here, because he was the CEO there for a while, and I'm going to ask him questions around South Shore, and maybe where, you know, this has been a long-standing project, which is of course the Queen's General, the master plan for South Shore. And we can go on and on of a lot of the different ideas that have been floating around. So I'm just wondering maybe where the whole master plan for South Shore is, and where is the Queen's project fitting within that master plan?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the honourable member for the question. I'm sure the honourable member from Queens would like to thank the honourable member for the question as well. We have received the master plan from the South Shore DHA, and we're reviewing it in the department. There has been a budget suggested to the board, and we're waiting for a proposal from the board on that.
The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, you know, if I remember correctly, this was sort of, it's always funny how this one sort of worked about, is where you had sort of the community group and the hospital foundation that were looking at renovations to Queen's General at the time. And in some places they had probably I think their eyes were larger than what they could bite or what they could chew. And as a part of that, before they could make that first step, you know, you had to look at the infrastructure that was held, because if we can't forget that within 20 minutes driving distance you have 3 hospitals. 20, 25 minutes. So you got Queens, you got South Shore, and you got Lunenburg that are all bang, bang, bang. And I believe there's also a clinic, I believe, up in, not New Ross, but New Germany. So there's a lot of infrastructure having to be watched out for. And of course, the challenge that you always heard, and you know, we'll talk about dialysis a little bit, but you know, you get dialysis coming from all directions, from within your caucus and from outside your caucus. But ultimately, the idea was renovation and work on Queen's General because it needed it, and then at the same time you had the South Shore that really would like to have some dialysis work done there. So I'm just wondering if some of those plans are being incorporated in, and I know the fundraising has been going on within Liverpool and the Queen's area, but just wondering maybe some more timelines. If the DHA has it and they're looking at the proposed budget, you know, when might we hear back from them?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And our understanding is that we'll hear back from them probably within a month or so. But it's really hard to say how soon we will actually hear back. But in that ballpark, I would think.
The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, and ultimately that's good to hear, because this is one of those projects that have been going on for a very long time that you want to hear some kind of movement on. You know, there's been a lot of discussions, there's been a lot of heartache, there's been a lot of work. You know, if you're asking for a fundraising committee to be doing that work, and they need to know what their target is in some cases. And I think that's what's been happening within Queens, and it's been happening for a long time. Not to say that the renovations to the regional hospital aren't needed. You know, I think for some time, if anyone that's visited the emergency room there knows it's quite small. Anyone that's visited there knows that there is no dialysis, that individuals either have to make a choice whether to go to Queens or actually drive into Halifax if you're sort of from on the other side of that district. So it is a challenge, I think, in many cases of having the right infrastructure in the right place, and I know they deserve to have you know, a clear mandate of what they should be doing on an infrastructure standpoint. I believe the hospital was built in, what, 1984 or something like that. You know, it's not an old hospital considering the age of some of the infrastructure we do have, but they are at a point where they need to actually do some work. So I'm just wondering, in the master plan, does it talk to a dialysis unit at the regional, or is it more ER based, or just wondering what the proposal really brings in for infrastructure renewal?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the greatest bulk of the proposal is ER-based. And, you know, earlier I had a chance to talk a bit with the honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park, who was asking about capital projects, and she was saying that her understanding was that there was about $2 billion in outstanding capital needs identified in the province. Sometimes I think it would be more accurate to say capital wants throughout the province, although there are some definite needs. And you know, I think about the Pictou area, New Glasgow, the Aberdeen Hospital. The emergency department there is not all that dissimilar to Queen's General. So these are, we face very big challenges in terms of trying to update our facilities and make sure they're off a good standard in terms of the pressures that are on them. I was talking about the Guysborough, the little community hospital in Guysborough. I had a chance to tour that facility. It's a lovely little hospital, but really, you know, you had the nursing stations built before computerization. You have terminals and keyboards that are stacked on top of areas that were built for paper filing cabinets. It's, you know, it's a workers' compensation case waiting to happen. And so you're in places like this, you can see how, you know, tremendously out of date the working environment has become for just the kinds of stretchers, ambulances, hospital beds, and other technology that now is commonplace in a modern healthcare facility.
The honourable member from Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, the Minister, for that. And if I remember correctly, you always had sort of two infrastructure lists in the department. You had the ones that you kind of wanted to do, and you had the ones that really needed to be done, but you didn't have the money for it. And it was always a struggle to really find those dollars for those little things. I mean, having the right articulating desk for your keyboard, or, you know, having room to store a couple extra stretchers is huge in a lot of these hospitals, because they weren't built for the kind of usage. And even though they're only 20 to 30 years old in some cases, they really weren't built for today's environment, which, you know, it always baffled me, because, you know, you had really good people, good architects, you know, providing you with the best information and the best designs, and yet, you know, you're out of date in 30 years. And it's, you know, it's not just in one place, where it's in many places amongst our 38 or 39 hospitals in the province. So I'll change a little, and I know that again I'm going to be sharing my time with the member for Cumberland South. And I know he'll probably ask some questions around Spring Hill and of course the Amherst Hospital and Pugwash and those areas. I want to ask a little more, and I wasn't sitting here when we talked about the Truro Hospital, the Colchester Regional, and you know, and I remember being a part of this one, and being in a meeting, and being lobbied for more money. And I remember saying, okay, if I find you the money, will you promise me that there will be no more? And I had assurances and promises that it would not go over and above, I believe, the $155 million. I think that was the number that was finally agreed upon. Because the challenge was always, you know, government will pick up the rest because the community can only raise a certain amount. And I agree with that. I mean, if the community is of a certain size and the fundraising capability within that area is a certain amount, and I think the number was 25 million at the time, I'm just wondering what exactly happened to that $155 million number, which was told to me, and this is 2 years ago now, was told to me that this is the maximum number, we promise you we won't go over, and here we are again, you're having to find more dollars to provide to that fund. So I'm just wondering where that project is at this point.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yeah. Well, as I like to say in the department, I've never built a hospital before. And boy, I'll tell you, when I looked at the financial history of this hospital, I was, to say the least, just totally outraged, to be honest with you. This hospital has almost doubled in cost since the initial approval at Cabinet, $104,000, and additional, I think, $56 million, and now an additional $24.5 million, and the ask was for an additional $36 million, or maybe $38 million. I wish I could tell the honourable member what went on here. I can't do that today, but I hope before I leave this place, I'm able to answer that question. I've had quite a lengthy, I don't mind telling the honourable member, I've had quite a lengthy discussion with the Auditor General about it, and we are still trying to sort out the details of a very good review. There will be a review of this. I don't know if it will be by the Auditor General, but it will be by some auditor. And at the end of the day, I hope we're actually able to learn what occurred so that we can be sure that we don't repeat this into the future. We don't have this kind of dollars. And if you can't plan your healthcare dollars in an effective way, then we might as well all give up and go home. And this, I think, is a very, it's a very bad example of healthcare spending run amok. The other thing I would say, and the honourable member said this, that, there is this kind of idea. I call the Department of Health now the bank of the Department of Health. There is this kind of idea in some circles, not in every circle, but in some circles, there is this view that the Department of Health has like a big money tree out back, and we can just cover everything, and nobody has to worry about the being fiscally responsible, because they can just trot down to the Department of Health, and we can look under the cushions and magically find money for whatever. And it's not exactly like that. There is no money tree. There aren't even any cushions for the most part. There probably should be, but there aren't any cushions. And we have to change the culture of all of our partners who are providing health care, and people need to know that they need to treat that money like it's their own, and they need to be very vigilant, and there isn't an unlimited supply of money in the Department of Health to cover bad management practices. That's not going to happen.
Thank you. The honourable member from Argyll.
Thank you very much. And even to the point, and I welcome a review of that project, because it's one that, you know, if you look at it quickly, it doesn't make sense. How you can take a hospital, let's say the one that was built in Amherst, or just outside in Nepan, you know, which should have been the right size, that was built in Cumberland County, was built for what, $56 million when it was built. It's a beautiful hospital. You walk into it, it is a modern new hospital, $56 million. And then you had this one. Okay, you can say that maybe over the construction phase, you know, you can add another $20 million to it, let's say. Okay, well, you know, you're $76 million, $80 million at an outside number. It became $106 million, and then it became $155 million, and now you're saying it's about $25 million or $30 million more than that. Here's what my thought is, and you know, God bless anybody that wants to do it, is that we continually worry about community share. You know, when we go build a hospital, we say we want community to provide 25% of the cost, or whatever the number is, what the ratio is. But you know what? If we would have foregone the $25 million from that just from that area, and said, okay, listen, we're going to build you an $80 million hospital, but here's what you're getting, probably everything would have been fine. You would have had your hospital for $80 million, and it would have been done. But no, because we expect to listen to the community, and we listen to the doctors, and we listen to everybody that's got an opinion on what a regional hospital needs to have, you end up having, I wouldn't call it a Taj Mahal, but one heck of a hospital. I mean, when it's finally done, this is going to be one hell of a nice hospital. And it's going to have everything in it, everything you ever want. But is it what we needed? You know, would we be better off to say, here's the box, here's the design, go build it, you know? And the decision would be whether it needs 75 beds versus 60 beds, you just size it appropriately. But in these cases, in my experience, and you're going to find this too, is that there just seems to be no limit to the extravagance of these hospitals, of what they need to be, when they really just need to be a square box with beds in it and good health care and a place that people can work in. So as much as, you know, I wish the community well in their new hospital, I believe maybe some of their extravagance has, you know, really put the project in jeopardy. It's put it behind schedule now because they're waiting. If I remember correctly, you know, the original design was supposed to use natural gas as the heating, and all of a sudden, well, we can't get natural gas, so we're going to have to use something else, and that's added the cost to the facility. So, you know, it just seems to be bad planning, and whatever review that can come out of it, I think, would be appreciated by some previous health ministers as well, because it just frustrated the hell out of us too. So I hope you do solve it, and I wish you well. And I know maybe you have a comment on that, maybe have one more thing to say, and then I'm going to share my time with the member for Cumberland South.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I would anticipate that not in the too distant future we'll be able to, you know, say what the review will look like, and who knows, the honourable member might have an opportunity to speak with the auditor or whoever is doing the review, and that would be very much appreciated as well. I mean, we really do have to learn from this. We have limited resources, and we need to use them wisely. And I understand when a community has aspirations for, you know, the very best, you know, for their citizens and what have you. But I think that we have to be realistic about what we can afford as well.
The Honourable, the Honourable, the member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So that'll conclude my questioning for this evening. I would like to come back maybe maybe tomorrow. I think there's a little bit more time. Maybe talk about maybe some mental health issues, and just wondering where some of those projects are in place. But for the time being, I'll give the rest of my time to the member for Cumberland South.
Thank you. The Honourable member's time will expire at 9:29. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to begin by thanking the Minister and be here this evening with her staff to answer questions around health-related. Very important issue, I know, for all the members here on both sides of the House, and I do, again, appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions of the Minister. Just only because, and I know it's not your department, Minister, but you mentioned, I heard you just say that you hope before you left the Department of Health you'd be able to find out why a project such as the one you mentioned in Colchester was so far beyond budget. And I know the government's already made a decision about this issue, but that was one of the very reasons why, if you look at back some of the projects over the last 5 years, there were projects that ran way over budget for all kinds of reasons. One was that there was a lot of construction in the province going on, so there weren't a lot of contractors coming forward. So we're kind of left to the mercy of the very few tenders that would actually come in, which would come in maybe a bit higher than what we had hoped. The other thing was steel prices, of course, went through the roof. There were all kinds of reasons, and that was one of the reasons why, and again, I know this government's already made a decision against it, that was one of the reasons why we as a government were taking a serious look at it was partnering with the private industry. And I know that I know there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of strong feelings around the private partnerships in the past in regards to schools. But I really felt that, and I know the government felt at the time that and we visited BC, and the Deputy Minister of Transportation, myself, and some other staff, and you know, one thing we heard loud and clear in BC, and a hospital we visited out there, which had the cancer center for the whole province of BC under the roof of this building, was that this building was at that time, about a year ago, was like due to open in May, and there were two things that we heard loud and clear. It was ready to be finished on budget and on time, and I have no idea. I don't know what's happened in the last year since that happened, Minister, but I do know that I felt at the time as well that we had to look at another way of building buildings in this province other than just the traditional way. And if there's some way it involved the private partnership that was good value for the taxpayer, provided good service for in this case it would be health services, then really it was a win-win all the way around for the people who are paying the bills and as well for government who are delivering service. So. There are other ways, and there were circumstances. I don't know what's happened here in Colchester, but certainly for, you know, we all should be concerned when you see a project that's overrun by the amount that you just mentioned. Anyway, Minister, I just want to go back for a moment, if we could, around the self-managed care program. I'm wondering if the Minister, I know I heard the Minister explain in the fall about the Maple process and about Maple 5, I think, being the highest level. I'm wondering if the Minister, since the fall, has taken the opportunity, of staff have, to review those who were denied through the program, to see if there's any way, and if I understood you right, I think you said you're over the number now that you had actually thought at first you would accept in the program. So I'm wondering about the numbers of the program now, what was anticipated at first, but the other thing is if you've had an opportunity to review some of those who have been denied, to see if there was any way to help these folks. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just before I go to the caregivers allowance, I'd say to the honourable member that the Colchester Hospital project is being built by the private sector. So in a way, it is a private-public partnership. It's public dollars, private sector building and managing the hospital, as all hospitals always are. The only difference is that at the end of the construction period, we'll own it, and rather than having it owned by a private proponent, and of course we'll operate it. The Caregivers Allowance Program was designed to, it was anticipated about 750 people would be eligible for this program. As of the end of March, 707 people qualified for the program. So, you know, staff in the department who crunch the numbers and make the projections weren't far off. And Today, I think there are about 614 people enrolled in the program, and some people have, gone into long-term care or have passed away, and at least one case, a caregiver has passed away. And so that accounts for the discrepancy between the 707 and the 614. Our department has indeed looked at the people who have not qualified. So we have a very good breakdown of, in terms of how many people applied for the program, how many people were assessed for the program. Not quite 1,000 people were assessed for the program. 900 and some odd people were assessed. And there were a number of people who didn't qualify for the program, and we know why that is. We know that, X number of cases didn't qualify for the program because they didn't meet the income test, for example, because there's a ceiling on the level of income. And then so many people were ineligible, they didn't fall into that Maple 5 on the assessment, and we know exactly how many people fell into the next level of care on the assessment tool, the Maple 4. So, and we even know some of the characteristics of those people. For example, people with MS. There were a number of people who had multiple sclerosis who have very high level needs in terms of care needs, but they had MS and they weren't aggressive, or this is the difference, I'm told, by the care coordinators in the assessment of what would make you a level 4 or a level 5.
The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister, for that. So I guess you started to go into what I was going to ask. The next question was around, has your department determined, so you've looked at people that didn't qualify, and you've done a review of why, and maybe the categories they'd fit in. So have you done a review, or has the staff done a review in regards to, I'm wondering if some of these people, first of all, are there people who could qualify for long-term care but wouldn't qualify at home through the Maple process?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much. And yes, we're able to say whether or not any of these folks would qualify for long-term care placement if they didn't have a caregiver to care for them at home. Yeah.
The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister. I guess my question was, so if there are people that would qualify for long-term care but would not necessarily qualify for the self-managed care program through the Maple process, would it be cheaper to keep them at home and change the program rather than have them go into long-term care?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
In a way, yes, that is true. But I guess the thing is that not everybody is seeking long-term care. There are people who are averse to going into long-term care, and I try to explain this to people from time to time. I'll use not this situation, but I'll use another situation. I might have somebody come to me and say, Miss Minister of Health, there's a home in our area that if you gave this home a license and they were able to take people because they had a license, they could take people who are in hospital beds. Think of all of the money you could save by giving them a license so that we could free up hospital beds, because it's a lot cheaper. It would be a lot cheaper to have somebody in these beds than in hospital beds. The problem with that analogy is that you don't just give a license, you also pay for the health care costs of those beds. And at the same time, when you move people from those beds in the hospital into the cheaper beds, then other people move into the expensive beds. And so you end up with the expensive beds filled and the cheaper beds filled. So in terms of the economic issues, it doesn't necessarily follow that you save money because you're implementing that policy. And the same thing is true in a way for caregivers. I don't think that we should look at the caregivers program, this is my own personal view, as a way to save the system money. It doesn't really save the system money because in most cases, those families aren't going to place their family member in long-term care anyway. We have a caregiver's allowance to give those caregivers some opportunity for a bit of a respite. We give them those allowances so that they can make some small little changes in their lives and their routines so that they don't become the sick person that needs hospital or health care. And I think that's really the basis for which we should provide a caregiver's allowance. That's my own personal view.
Thank you. The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for that. So if I think I've heard the Minister earlier say to my colleague that the department is looking now at what the future of the self-managed care program will be, whether it'll continue, change, or be stopped. I think that's what I heard you say earlier. I had a question around addiction services. If you prefer, I'd wait till you get into. It's okay. Addiction services in Cumberland County, as you're probably aware, there's a very good program, addiction services, being offered in Cumberland County throughout the county. It's based between Amherst and there's also All Saints Hospital in Spring Hill. And there's some suggestion that that service may move from Cumberland County. I'm just wondering if the minister could elaborate on that, please.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much. I don't have any information here for the member right now. I'm not aware of that, but I will look into it and let the member know.
Thank you. The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I would appreciate it if you could get the information for me. And it could be a rumor, and I hope it is just a rumor, but I want to try to find out if, in fact, there's any substance to the discussion being held in the community. The other. As the Minister will know, I'd written back to the Minister back in the fall, and I'd also asked, I think, a question during question period. There had been a request for proposals put out for a long-term care facility in the western portion of Cumberland South, somewhere in between the River Harsborough Advocate area. And my understanding was the timelines around that RFP have been extended. I believe it was till November, I think, of the correspondence I had back at the time. I wonder if the Minister can just give me an update on that RFP.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Can I go back on the addictions question for a moment to the honourable member? HPP, Health Promotion and Protection, also provides some resources for addiction services. So our numbers in health aren't indicating any decrease to your DHA for addiction services, but we'll have to check at HPP. The numbers here don't indicate in that DHA any decrease. So, but that doesn't mean that the HPP piece. So we'll have to check. HPP will be on tomorrow in estimates as well. With respect to the long-term care facility that the honourable member has just raised, Mr. Chair, I don't know for certain, but the deputy and I seem to think that there's been a request for a proposal and no response. Is that possible? Is that the one the member is referring to? I don't know.
The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I was on the understanding there was at least one response to the RFP. but that I think it was to close, and I don't remember the dates, Minister. I think it was September, October, and I think there was an extension towards the end of November. And I think in the correspondence that I received back from yourself was that there was an extension, and that further detail will be coming later. But I do believe there was at least one response, probably from a provider and a facility owner in the county now that probably responded to the same RFP.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Is this a nursing home in South Cumberland? Is that the area you're looking at, 22 beds? Okay, so there was a closing date of the RFP on November the 29th, 09, and there were respondents. Proponents that submitted responses submitted per diems that were significantly over the allowed amount. And the advice that we've received from TIR procurement staff is that negotiations will commence with the lowest bidder.
Thank you. The Honourable Member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for that. So the department would continue to negotiate with the lowest bidder to try to bring it in line, I guess, with what would be acceptable within your department for per diems. Is that right?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. We continue to have a number of small projects around the province that we are working really hard to move forward. And I told the honourable member from Argyll that we're going to throw a little party in the department when we're able to close off these beds. It's been a long process, and the staff have worked really hard, but we haven't given up on any of the projects, and we won't give up on this project either. And again, I mean, going to the points, I think, in some ways that were made by the honourable member from Argyll earlier, many of these organizations have come to the table with great energy and aspirations for new homes in their communities. And their primary concern and consideration is to build a facility that will benefit the community and that will result in great care for the residents of their community. And that's what motivates them, and I understand that. It's been actually very nice to meet some of these people who are working from one end of the province to the other on new facilities. But we in the department, we have to support those efforts, but we have to do it within an envelope. And it's been challenging at times. Sometimes projects have aspirations for their home that go beyond our ability to financially support those aspirations, shall we say. And so we have to work with the community organization and ensure that we get really good value for dollar. It can be a difficult process at times, but it has in any of the cases that I've had any involvement in, and I've met with the odd group around the province who have thought that maybe I could find a little more money under the couch to help out. I've been very impressed at how they have continued to work with the department staff, and department staff do not give up on these projects because we want these beds and we can bring them in. We can bring them in on budget, but it's a process.
Thank you. The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for that. And I think you'd find that, you know, I don't know about the rest of the province and other areas, but I know my own area. They're in that particular area. They're certainly looking very anxiously towards the future, and they would appreciate the fact that you've got a budget to work with, and that you know, whether it's per diems or whether it's capital costs that has to come in within budget, and they would know that you'd work diligently to make sure that happens. They're just concerned, as I know a lot of communities are concerned about seeing loved ones, you know, moved to other areas of the province and make it almost impossible. I remember one lady, her husband was actually moved down to South Shore somewhere, and you know, just separating those people, as you've heard, I'm sure, many times. And but I think you'd find that people in my area would be very understanding of the fact that you've got a budget to work with, you know, the per diems and so on. So anyway, I appreciate your answer, and I appreciate the fact that the department's still working on that facility for that area. I'm going to change to a different area, same kind of an issue, but a different area of my constituents is Navigate. And again, I'd written to the minister back in the fall about and I haven't got all the details here in front of me or the numbers, but some time ago, there was an announcement that the care center in Advocate would, originally there was going to be a bit of a reallocation of space, I believe, within this facility. Then as folks got involved, the project seemed to grow a bit and became even more, I think, than what the community had originally asked for. What we were attempting to do at the time, what I was attempting to do, Advocate, Minister, as you may or may not know, if you've ever been down there, it's probably 40 minutes, 45 minutes from Parsboro on a good day, on good weather, but in the middle of winter, it's a real challenge to get there in any kind of time, any kind of shorter time than that, So there was originally it was going to be some allocation of space and with two additional beds, because that seemed to be, it's a small community and with a distance, and they are from larger communities with these type of facilities that are required. There was an agreement that the medical folks needed some additional space for different services, and there was a requirement of probably two additional beds, which doesn't seem like a lot to many people, but in Advocate it would make a huge difference. Somehow it grew and it became an addition. Anyway, at the end of the day, what was agreed upon was that this community, being a small community it is, but very supportive of their school and their healthcare system, agreed to raise their portion for the project. And in fact, as part of that agreement, in meetings that we had with the District Health Authority and with the Department of Health, they owned a property in the community that actually they kept for. When they had a doctor living full-time in the community, they had a facility that they owned, and the local foundation agreed that they would sell this property, and that would become part of their commitment. So they've raised their portion. They've indeed sold the property. So now they have a nurse practitioner in a small building. It's right on site at the care facility. They've sold that property. They've got their portion. So the community has their commitment met, and have had some for quite some time now. And again, I know the project, I know you have to stay within budget, and I know this project just over time has kind of taken on legs of its own that has changed several times. When really all the community was asking for from day one was two additional beds, and it seemed to have grown into a $1 million plus project. But anyway, the community does have its commitment in place. They've sold the property that they own to make part of their commitment, and now are kind of wondering if you could update them in regards to that project as of date.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the honourable member referring to Bayview Memorial? Is that it? Bayview Memorial. So I'm advised that due to delays in planning and design, the project could not be completed in 2009-2010, and that the redevelopment of the space is expected to occur in the fiscal year 2010-2011. The estimate in 2009-10 was that this would cost $623,000. $623,000, and the estimate for this year is $1.5 million, $1,580,000. And I was, because I see so many small homes, it's hard to keep track of them all. But if I remember correctly, I saw a piece of correspondence dated the 3rd of June 2009 to the honourable member from the Deputy Minister, indicating that those 2 beds had been allocated. But I'm also advised that there may not be an order in council approval on that yet. So that's all of the information I have, and we'll have to track it down and see what else I can find out.
Thank you. The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the Minister, thank you. That was kind of the point I was making, was that this project went from the community asking for 2 additional beds, a reallocation of space within the facility, and as folks got involved, and I, to their credit, I know they're trying to improve upon the healthcare delivery, and so the project grew from 2 additional beds to some reallocation of space to then it becoming an expansion of the facility, and it grew and grew and grew. So, but the community was asked at the time to come up with their, I believe it would be a 3rd, if I understand right, which they did. So the community sold some property they had in the foundation. They raised this extra money. They had it setting aside, and then the project again seemed to grow for reasons no one really seems to know, other than, and no disrespect to anyone, I think some engineers got involved. They looked at the building and said, well, really, maybe you need to do this and should do something else. And then first thing you know, it becomes a $1.5 million project. Anyway, and again, I know the minister's faced with some tough decisions around budgeting, and I know that this was a hospital which was changed to a care center, so it's something the community really, I'm told that as the building was built a number of years ago, the community really came on board like a lot of small communities do, and come up with their share long before the government was ever able to find theirs. And if somehow your department could take a look at this, excuse me again, and just let me know, the community really, it's actually been 2 or 3 years, and again, the community's got their portion sitting there, and they're wondering what the next step is. And Minister, in all due respect, this number will only grow. If you don't do what the facility just actually needs, the community needs, and as more people look at it, the price is going to continue to grow. What will happen is pretty soon the community won't have their share any longer. Pretty soon you won't be able to afford it through your budget because you won't have the necessary dollars to do it. So I'm just asking on behalf of the community if the department could take a realistic look at, and if I understood you just right, you said that the plan is there money in the budget this year for that? And if there is, how much?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yeah, the department is still working with the DHA to, determine the best use of the space there. And I believe there is some money in this year's budget for that particular project, $1.58 million. But as I said, I'm not sure if it's had the appropriate approvals in some ways. So I will look into that.
The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I look forward to that. Just to, as the Minister would know, and because of our because of our location and proximity to New Brunswick, there's a lot of cancer patients that from Cumberland County, a lot of patients in general. And there are, I understand there are people from New Brunswick that come across and come into the healthcare system in Nova Scotia, but there are a tremendous lot of people in Cumberland County that go to Moncton. Their doctors refer them there for cancer treatments, and in fact, I've had contact from a lady just this past week over that very thing. 2 things always seem to come up. One is the cost of medications, particularly for people that are going for dialysis. It seems that if you are on dialysis in Nova Scotia and there are certain medications you need, the patient pays for them. But if you go to Moncton for dialysis, it's all provided to those patients free of charge to the patient. Somebody's paying for it, but so if you're Nova Scotian, you get the service in Nova Scotia, you pay for the medications. If you're a Nova Scotian and go to Moncton for dialysis, get the service there, you get the services free of charge. So a lot of patients in our area don't want to come to Halifax. They don't want to stay in the province. They want to be sent to Moncton, to Brunswick, because they're not paying for the medications. Is the minister aware of this? And is there any information? I'm sure someone's paying. I'm sure it probably ends up being the province of Nova Scotia, I would think.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, not only am I aware of this, but I'm aware that there are differences inside Nova Scotia between DHAs. And you know, sometimes it's said that we have 10 different healthcare systems in Canada when you look at the provinces, and sometimes I think we have, you know, 9 plus the IWK different healthcare systems inside Nova Scotia. When you look at DHAs, there's a certain amount of autonomy at the DHA level to, you know, to purchase supplies and what have you. So, for example, I just recently learned that if you're having cataract surgery in some DHAs in Nova Scotia, you pay a different amount for those for the lenses they use than if you're in another DHA, and it's all based on probably the DHAs ordering individually and the bulk in which they order and so on. So, you know, this is a situation that we have because we have a certain degree of autonomy in our healthcare system, so that provinces, for example, can make their own decisions about what they'll cover and what they won't cover, and those decisions get made based on a wide range of opinions. You know, ambulance fees vary dramatically from province to province. There are people who come to Nova Scotia in the summertime, let's say, or as visitors, and they're in a situation where they require an ambulance, and they get a bill for the ambulance, and they go, oh my gosh, you know, like that would never happen in our province. The ambulance fees aren't anything like this. And so you will find a great deal of variation from province to province. So I can imagine that, particularly because we have all of these border issues, you know, in your part of our province, I can see that people have an attachment to the healthcare system in New Brunswick, for example, for a whole variety of reasons: convenience and location, and probably people who work in New Brunswick use health services in Amherst and vice versa. And I certainly became aware of the interconnection during H1N1 when people at the hospital in Amherst, who work in Amherst, but who were from New Brunswick, were getting vaccinated. And some questions were raised about whether or not that was an appropriate use of our vaccine. So it's you know, it's complicated when you have a border area. One of the things that our department, our government, and the Department of Health will be attempting to do in terms of better utilization of health dollars in the coming year, and I don't know if you were here when I had a chance to talk about this earlier, is we've learned from Prince Edward Island. Prince Edward Island has a nurse hired in New Brunswick who works to repatriate she's from Cumberland County? Oh, to repatriate patients from PEI.
Order, please. Order, please. The time allotted for debate in Committee on Supply has now expired. The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we wish you to now rise and report progress.
Considered agree? Agreed. Motion carried.
Order, please. The Committee on Supply reports.
Has made progress and begs leave to sit again.
Carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that ends the business for the government today. After the daily routine and question period, Mr. Speaker, we will be going into Her Majesty's supply once more. And if time permits, we will be calling Bills 7, 10, 13, 16, 18, 19, and 22. Now, Mr. Speaker, I do say we now rise to meet from the hours tomorrow of 12 noon to 8 p.m.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow from noon until 8 p.m. The motion before the House, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The House is adjourned.